In the dead heart of the Sahara, on a cliff of dry stone, there are paintings of people swimming. Not praying, not walking. Swimming. Bodies stretched forward through painted water, arms reaching. Around them, other walls show hippos, crocodiles, giraffes, longhorned cattle. Animals that should not be here, in a desert where rain can fail for years, and the horizon looks like another planet. But these paintings are not fantasy. They are evidence. 7,000 years ago, this place was alive with grass, lakes, rivers, fish, and human voices. And in that vanished Sahara, before sunrise, a young cattle herder opens his eyes. He hears bells on longhorn cattle. He smells smoke, milk, wet earth. He does not know he is living inside a world that will disappear. You wake beside him in the blue cold before dawn. The camp is quiet but not silent. Cattle breathing in the dark, a calf nudging its mother, an old woman stirring ash back into a fire. The boy rises barefoot, and the ground under him is not sand. It is grass, damp from the night. Beyond the camp, acacia trees stand against the brightening sky. Antelope graze the edge of the plain. Far out in the haze, elephants pass like shadows. This is the Sahara at the peak of the African Humid Period. Not a green carpet from coast to coast, not paradise. A vast shifting world of savanna, lakes, wetlands, and dry ridges. Good seasons and bad, with enough rain for life to spread where only desert rules today. To the boy, none of this is strange. This is home. Now pull back, from the boy, the cattle, the grass, until the whole earth turns beneath you. The Green Sahara was made by something no human could see, a slow wobble in the planet's motion. Earth's axis does not point the same way forever. Over thousands of years, this orbital precession shifts the timing and strength of sunlight. Around the height of the humid period, northern summers ran hotter. The land pulled air northward and dragged the African monsoon hundreds of kilometers past its modern edge. Rain crossed into the Sahara. Basins filled, rivers returned, grass took hold. At times, Lake Megachad swelled larger than the Caspian Sea. The orbit alone was not enough. Feedbacks in the land did the rest. The boy knows none of it. He only knows clouds building in the distance. The sky was opened by a wobble, and by a wobble, it would close. The boy's people are cattle pastoralists. They live by movement, milk, pasture, and herd memory. Their long-horned animals are wealth, food, labor, pride, and risk. A healthy cow can mean survival. A failed waterhole can mean death. But before families like his moved here with cattle, others lived by the water. Earlier, hunter-fishers camped along lakes and rivers, a watery life some archaeologists have called aqualithic. They cut barbed harpoons from bone, ate catfish from lakes that are now dust, and shaped some of the oldest pottery known anywhere on Earth. The boy sometimes finds their traces without understanding them. A broken point after rain, a shard under a hoof, a bone in dry mud. He thinks the land is giving up small secrets, but it is older than he can imagine. Water people came first, then cattle people. Both belong to the Green Sahara. In the heat of afternoon, his mother takes him from the herd, up to a rock shelter where the air is cool and the light turns red on the stone. Inside, the walls are already crowded with memory. Older figures in ochre and shadow, strange round-headed forms, hunters, cattle with great curved horns. Some were painted before his mother was born, some before her mother's mother. She mixes red ochre with water. Then she takes his wrist and presses his open hand flat to the cold rock. She leans close and blows pigment across his fingers. A red cloud blooms. And when she lifts his hand away, the shape stays. A pale hand inside a field of red. He does not know why his throat tightens. No one says, "Remember me." The wall says it for them. Remember that hand. We are going to find it again. By evening, the herd is moving again. You walk beside the boy as cattle push through grass, horns rocking, hides bright with dust and low sun. The older herders rarely shout. They click their tongues, lift a stick, read which calves tire and which cows wander. Cattle turn grass into milk. They let people live where farming alone would fail. By around 6.5 to 5.5 thousand years ago, this herding life is everywhere in the Green Sahara. But cattle also chain people to water and pasture. The boy's whole life is a map of needs, where the grass is sweetest, where reeds grow, where crocodiles wait, where a spring lasts through the dry months. This world is not Atlantis, not aliens, not a lost super civilization. It is real climate, real people, real animals, and that is stronger than any myth. If you want more vanished worlds rebuilt from evidence, subscribe to Lorewell. The boy has never seen the whole of Lake Megachad. No one can, from the ground. But lift the camera above him. His camp becomes a mark in the grass, the cattle dark grains on a green-brown plain, rivers like cuts of light, and then the land opens into water. At its greatest, Megachad covered something like 300,000 to 400,000 square kilometers. At times larger than the Caspian Sea, the biggest lake on Earth today. This was no oasis. It was an inland freshwater world. Waves under the wind, fish crowding the shallows, hippos surfacing like wet stones, large crocodiles sliding under floating reeds, birds in numbers that made the air itself seem alive. Fishers worked the shore. Herders came for pasture. Children learned which mud holds a footprint and which can swallow a leg. The boy may know only rumors of such water, but he lives under the same monsoon that made it. Across the central Sahara, stone keeps the record. In Tassili, Niger in Algeria, in the Acacus of Libya, in Enadi in Chad, cliffs and shelters preserve one of the great visual archives of ancient Africa. Layered, because the world was layered. The oldest images include the mysterious Roundhead period. Large human-like forms, sometimes floating, sometimes ceremonial, so strange they feel almost dreamlike. Later come the cattle and the pastoral scenes, herds, milking, people walking with animals, daily life turned into line and pigment. To us, this is archaeology. To the boy, it is company. He has watched elders paint by firelight, seen children point at a painted animal and laugh, heard a story told with a finger tracing the curve of a horn. The wall is not decoration. It is memory made visible. It says, this is what mattered. Water, animals, hands, the living world. The end begins without announcing itself. No wall of sand at the horizon. No God speaks. No single drought destroys everything. At first, it is only a wrong season, a pool that should last until the rains cracks early. A slope once thick with grass comes back thin. The herd must be pushed farther before the cattle settle and feed. The boy hears adults talking after dark, when children should be asleep. Move east, wait one more season, send scouts, follow the storm line. The African Humid Period ran from roughly 14,500 to about 5,000 years ago. Its ending is real, but its speed is still argued over. Some records read an abrupt regional collapse across a few centuries, others a slower, patchier retreat that differed from place to place. The boy lives inside that uncertainty. For scientists, it is a debate. For him, it is a waterhole that should not be empty. As the boy grows taller, the land starts to change in ways that reinforce themselves. Grass is not just grass. Plants shade soil, roots hold ground, leaves breathe moisture back into the air. A living surface can help cool the land and feed local rain. But as the green thins, the ground turns brighter, hotter, more exposed. Bare earth throws sunlight back differently, dust lifts more easily, moisture leaves faster, and the land grows less able to call down the rain it needs. This vegetation albedo feedback is one leading idea for how the drying may have amplified. It was not the first cause. The great driver was orbital precession weakening the northward monsoon. But once the rains began to retreat, the land itself may have pushed the system farther toward desert. The herder has no word for albedo. He has other words: thirst, dust, farther, again. And the oldest truth of pastoral life: cattle cannot drink from memory. Years pass. The boy becomes a young man. Shoulders harder, feet tougher, able to calm a nervous cow and read a cloud and decide whether to trust it. One season his people pass near old ground, and he sees pale fragments in the sediment, stone, bone, things the wind has worked to the surface. He cannot know that thousands of years later, in modern Niger, a place called Gobero will become one of the clearest windows into this lost Sahara, where wind erosion uncovered graves from different moments of the green world, evidence of earlier, larger-bodied hunter-fishers and later, smaller-bodied herders. Two human chapters written into the same land. But now there are no excavation grids, no labels, no museum glass. Only a young man watching cattle drink near a place where others once buried their dead. The Sahara is already becoming an archive. It simply has not dried enough to open. The animals tell the truth before the people agree on it. Giraffes still pass sometimes, but less often. Elephants become something seen farther away. Hippos hold where the water is deep, then only where it is reliable, then only in the stories of travelers. Crocodiles survive in shrinking channels. Fishers follow the fish, herders the grass, hunters the herds, every life sorted by rain. The young man returns to a lake he knew as a child. The shore has pulled back, mud flats stretch where reeds once stood. Fish bones crack under his feet. And yet from inside one good season, the world can still look whole. A storm still turns dust to scent, seeds still flash green, cattle still lower their heads to drink. That is what makes a slow ending dangerous. It gives you hope in pieces, enough to stay, enough to remember, enough to be surprised when the old pattern does not return. As the Sahara dries, people move, not all one way, not all at once. Some follow the rain south, some seek mountain refuges, some hold by shrinking lakes as long as they can, and some move east, toward a river that keeps its promise when local waters fail. The Nile, a line of water through a hardening world. There is a serious hypothesis that the drying helped push people toward the Nile Valley, adding pressure, skills, animals, and ideas to the long processes that eventually shaped ancient Egypt. But say it carefully. Climate did not create Egypt. Human history is not a machine with one lever. The valley had its own deep development, farming, settlement, ritual, trade, conflict, and generations of choice. Drying may have been one force among many. The young man does not know the future word Egypt. He only knows some relatives have gone east, and when they left, they took cattle, songs, and the memory of rain. The rock walls keep receiving new images, but the cast of animals changes. In the latest layers of Saharan art, much later, thousands of years after the boy, a new creature appears, the camel, an animal of dry distance, of desert roots and wells and survival in a harsher land. His people still live by cattle. Milk is still the center of mourning, a good pasture still a blessing. But the future has begun to enter the picture. Water is no longer just a place. It is information, a remembered route, a guarded secret, a reason to travel before dawn and rest under stone at noon. Imagine a camel painted over older cattle, not because the past was erased, but because another world is arriving on top of it. The round-headed figures remain, the cattle remain, the handprints remain, and then, beside them, the signs of desert life begin to appear. Each generation paints what it cannot afford to lose. Now he is old. His hair has gone pale with dust, his hands thick at the knuckle, his knees sore in the cold mornings. Children run past him with water skins, and for a moment he remembers being fast. The world they inherit is smaller than his childhood. Not empty, not dead, but narrower. The rains still come in some years. A storm can still make the plain smell young. Seeds still burst from dry ground after water. Cattle still find pasture in favored places. But the pattern has changed. The wet season is shorter, the dry season longer, the herd smaller, the camps more urgent, the arguments over wells deeper into the night. He remembers hippos where children now see cracked mud. He remembers reeds taller than a man. He remembers walking home with wet legs. No one calls it the end of the African Humid Period, but around 5,000 years ago, the Green Sahara is giving way, and he can feel the border moving through his life. One evening, the old man returns to the rock shelter. The entrance is half choked with windblown sand. The path is harder underfoot. The air tastes of dust before sunset. He steps inside and the temperature drops and the world goes quiet. The paintings are still there, faded, smoke-darkened, scratched by time, but there. Cattle with sweeping horns, human figures, older shapes he never understood. And then he sees it, low on the wall, the red field, the pale hand. His hand, smaller than he remembers, younger than he feels, still open. His mother is gone. The camp of his childhood is gone. Water holes are gone. Roots are gone. But this mark remains. Thousands of years from now, in places like Tassili, Niger, real handprints and layered paintings will still survive. They give us no names. They give us something older. I was here. The world was green. Remember. The camera rises one last time. Generations pass. The old man is gone. His children grow old. Their children inherit stories that no longer match the land beneath their feet. The drying goes on, sharp in some regions, slow in others. And scientists still read lake beds, pollen, dust, ancient shorelines, dunes, and bones. Because the evidence will not reduce to one tidy date. But the direction is unmistakable. The monsoon retreats south, vegetation thins, lakes shrink, rivers fail, dust spreads. The Sahara becomes the largest hot desert on Earth. Not through myth, not punishment, not Atlantis, not aliens, but through orbital change, monsoon retreat, and feedbacks in land, dust, and rain. The green world does not vanish into nothing. It survives in buried fish bones, in barbed harpoons, in pottery, in graves uncovered by wind, in shorelines stranded above empty basins, and on stone walls where painted swimmers still cross water that dried up thousands of years ago. We are the only creature that can stand in that silence and read the whole arc at once. 7,000 years ago, you could have walked from the Atlantic to the Nile through grass, past lakes full of hippos, among people who pressed their children's hands onto the rock so the future would know them. Today, that same walk would kill you in a week. The same sky did both. It opened the door and it closed it, on a clock too slow for any single life to feel. The Sahara did not die in a day. It faded unevenly across generations. A child opened his eyes in a world of grass and milk and rain, and an old man looked back from a harder land and touched the memory of his own hand on stone. So here is what I want to know from you. If you could step into one moment of the Green Sahara, what would you choose to see? The swimmers crossing a desert lake, a herd moving through wet grass, or one red handprint drying on a wall while the world outside was still green? And if it were your wall, your one color, your world about to vanish, what would you paint? Tell me below. The world was green. Someone made sure we would remember.